Mr. Granoff, faleminderit që pranuat ftesën e mbrëmje ABC për të biseduar bashk. Si rezulton fondi në Shqipëri krahasuar me gjitha iniciativat e ngjashme në botë?
So first, Mirela, it's a pleasure for me to be with you again. And I look forward to these interviews in a way because it's a chance for us to talk about the progress that the foundation is making and how it affects people. And obviously your program is watched by many, many people across Albania, and that's an important opportunity for us. So thank you. So I'm happy to be with you today. It turns out that our fund and foundation, as it compares to other similar operations around the world, is similar in some ways, but different in other ways. And so Albania has, because of its nature, has given us an opportunity to be in some way a bigger part of change here than was afforded to other funds and foundations. This has been both a bigger challenge and a bigger opportunity. And so we spend a lot of time, and the board spends a lot of time, making sure that we aren't just taking advantage of the opportunity, but that we're aware of the responsibilities, right? That we have an opportunity to make change here, to have an impact here that is probably greater than what other funds and foundations have been able to do across Europe, let's say.
Por si shpjegohet ky sukses I fondit në Shqipëri?
There are a couple of things I think that we have focused on that have made a real difference. One is that we view the activities of the foundation through a very similar lens to that we viewed our profit-making investments. That we really care about outcome. We really care about execution. We really care about impact. It's not enough to have good intentions. You really need to be able to deliver. And this is true in the business world. No one cares so much in the business world what your intentions are. They look at the bottom line and have you been able to make money, build the business, or not? And we've tried to do that. That's the first thing. The second is that one of the realities about operating in a relatively small country like Albania, especially in the foundation context, is that there's almost nothing that we do that doesn't intersect with government, either national, local, municipal, somehow. And therefore, we've had to think about how we create effective partnerships with government at all levels. And this goes to the responsibility and opportunity side of it. Not many other foundations have had the need to do this in the way that we have, or the opportunity. So, you know, I've been coming to this country for a long time. And we, from the very beginning, have made sure that people understand that we are above politics. We deal with everybody. People know that our projects don't have any political context to them, and that people in government know that we're a very effective, reliable partner. And the third is we know what we don't know. I don't think that we know how to have a storehouse of knowledge, let's say, that nobody else has. But we're pretty good at finding the best models around the world for things, so we're not reinventing the wheel, as we would say in English. But finding these kinds of very effective models wherever they are, and not just importing them to Albania, but adapting them to Albania.
Sure.
Right? And this is, I think, if you think about the success of the foundation, we can point to examples where we brought models from the United States, models from Israel. The project that we're working on in the pyramid is bringing a model from Yerevan, all right? We've been able to find those models, bring them here and adapt them. And I think it's the combination of those three things that explains the success that we've had.
Ju keni një kohë të gjatë në Shqipëri, përpara se t'ju pyes se si është përvoja juaj në vendin tonë, unë do doja të flisnim pak për situatën aktuale ekonomike në vend. Si u duket ekonomia shqiptare tani që flasim?
I think if you look at the current economic situation in Albania, you would probably see it as a glass half full. That is that there's a dynamic happening that is fairly positive about people investing, businesses growing. You can look around Tirana and it looks like a pretty bustling city. The traffic jams get longer and longer every time that I'm coming, and that you see economic progress over time. At the same time, it's clear that overall rates of economic growth are not so high, that the level of foreign direct investment is not as high as people would like, and there are impediments to economic growth by corruption, by organized crime, by security, by other things that are obviously holding the economy back. And so people tend to look at things as either black or white. All right, but the reality, if you looked at the Albanian economy today, is I think you would probably, if you looked at the data, not just what your opinion was of the data, I think you'd probably conclude that the macro economy today is kind of a glass half full. And in a way, I watched the governor of the central bank yesterday for a little while, and he was talking about the level of economic growth, and he's someone that we know because he once worked for us. He worked for our bank. So, and I think the way he described the economy overall is quite factual and probably right, and you would probably describe it that way.
Dakor, Banka Botërore sot ka nxjerrë raportin rajonal për ekonomitë e rajonit, mes tyre edhe për Shqipërinë. Duket sikur perspektiva afat shkurtër është pozitive, thot Banka Botërore. Ka mbështetur edhe eurobondin e marrë nga qeveria shqiptare. Cili është opinioni juaj, si për perspektivën ekonomike afat shkurtër, afat mesme, afat gjatë, por edhe për eurobondin e marrë nga qeveria Rama?
So first I should tell you that I'm no expert in this area. So I'm not an economist, and my job here, in a way, is not to deal with the world from 50,000 feet up, the macroeconomy, but in a way to deal with the microeconomy. And I have to tell you, I spend the great majority of my time here looking at very granular kinds of things. Obviously, being able to get the Eurobond offering off the way it happened, both its size and the relative interest rate, indicates a degree of confidence, let's say global confidence, in the ability of the Albanian economy to pay the bondholders, right? And so you have to say that this is a fairly positive thing. The long term will be determined not by Eurobonds, not by the Bank of Albania, not by the Ministry of Finance, but will be determined by people's activity, right, over time. And if the environment is created where people can achieve their goals and aspirations and build the kind of economy and opportunity they want, then the long term for Albania will look quite bright. And if things are holding the economy back, it will limit people's opportunity. And as I've said before, you know, people vote sometimes with their feet, and people in Albania vote with their feet, right? And so if they don't see opportunity over the longer term for themselves and for their children, you see higher rates of emigration than you'd want to see, right? And so the goal of some of our programs, and obviously the goal of government programs, should be to look at that and try to create an environment where people are incented to stay as opposed to incented to leave.
Qartë, kohët e fundit politikën shqiptare, të cilën ju e njihni shumë mirë në fakt, është folur për oligark. Ka oligark në Shqipëri në opinionin tuaj?
So I have to tell you, this is an area I don't know much about, and we both in terms of the activities of the fund and the foundation, we don't have much opportunity to come into contact with people who you would describe kind of that way. The issue of having a concentration of wealth and power in a small number of people is a problem in many countries around the world. People would say it's a problem in the United States too. And the perception that is often created is that somehow that wealth was not created in the most legitimate way, and that's a problem, right? It's a problem not just for how people see those businesses, but a problem for the government and for the society to be able to see that we don't provide the same outcome to everybody, but we provide the same opportunity to people. And obviously the experience of not just in Albania, but experience in Eastern Europe and Balkans generally is that there were surely people who were able to amass wealth in not the most legitimate ways. And this has been a problem for the legitimacy of government, whether you're talking about Russian oligarchs, who are the ones that get in the paper the most, certainly in the United States, or people, similar kinds of people in other countries, including Albania.
Dakor, klima politike në Shqipëri, mendoni se e ndihmon investimin e huaj, është bindse për të fikur investitorët huaj?
I think that it's important for the Albanian government and people to understand that in a way, Albania is like a company, and it has competitors. And when you think about foreign direct investment, you have to think about it as if you're a company and you're competing. The reality is that it's not an absolute thing. When Albania thinks about foreign direct investment, it has to compete for the money. It has to compete for the capital. It has to compete with the countries in the region. It has to compete with countries in Asia, right? And it has to think about it in that way, look at those models, look at what these other countries are doing, and make sure that it can compete on a global level. No one is investing, coming to invest blindly. People have choices, just like they have choices in business. And the challenge for the Albanian government, I think, is to recognize that and structure programs that compete with its neighbors and with the rest of the world to encourage foreign direct.
Si po vepron qeveria? Po vepron drejtimin e dur?
I think they're aware of it. I think that there's a growing awareness of this fact, but I think that there's more that they can do in this way. And part of it is because it's a mentality, in the sense that people in government usually don't see themselves like a business competing against other countries in this way. They have to change the way they think about it first. It's not just sitting around and establishing some program and saying, how am I going to attract investment this way? It's almost like you go to business school, right? You have to say, okay, let me analyze the competitors. Let me analyze the programs that they're doing. What tends to work? What doesn't work? How can I implement those programs? What's the best way for me to create maybe even another structure, than another architecture that is currently in government to do that? And I think that's a process. And can more be done? Yeah. Is there more that government needs to do that? Yes. It's a very competitive world, and by the way, every country faces the same challenge. So my guess is that there's not a country you could go to in this region that is not having, where someone's not asking the exact same question that you're asking: how do we encourage more foreign direct?
E qartë, por a është një dëgjuese e mirë qeveria Rama për këshilla të kësaj natyre?
Yeah, I think they are a good listener, but do they need to do more? Yeah, I think they need to do more. And I think most governments need to do more if they're going to be successful. So I think if you're asking about me in a more personal way, I think we have quite a good dialogue with this government. We've had quite a good dialogue with other governments. I think Prime Minister understands that I don't have any political agenda. We don't have any political agenda. We've known each other a long time. So we're able to have a pretty open conversation about things. So that part is true. But they have to obviously take those conversations and all the rest of them that they're having and have an action plan that they execute on over time, just the way we have to, right? We're ultimately judged by the results, not by what we say, right? And that's the way people judge us, and ultimately that's the way any government will be judged, including this one.
Dakor, reforma në drejtësi është një projekt I nisur tashmë në Shqipëri. Si e shikoni ecurinë e reformës në drejtësi?
So again, I have to tell you at the start that it's not an area that I'm an expert in, right? And my opinion is the opinion of an amateur, let's say, not a professional in this way. If you step back, obviously one of the most important goals of government, any government, is to have a system of justice that people trust. It's one of the primary purposes of government. It separates organized society from chaos, all right, historically. So there's a big responsibility to create a justice system that people can trust. This has obviously been a significant issue in Albania for a long time. It's a significant issue in many countries. If you look at at judicial reform, you'd have to, and you look at what's happening, you'd have to say that we are probably closer to the end of the beginning and than the beginning of the end of this process. So it's a process that started. Does it have a ways to go? Boy, it does have a ways to go, and it's not a very easy thing to do, but if Albania wants to progress over the longer term, whether it's EU accession or longer term kinds of things, it needs to figure out how to get this right.
Zotë Granoff, ju keni 28 vite në Shqipëri. Në mos gaboj apo 25? I'm not sure.
23.
Dhe ju I njihni të gjithë personazhet e politikës shqiptare. Pra ata kanë ardhur, ata kanë ikur, ju keni qëndruar dhe ju I njihni që në fillim, në zhvillim, në kulmin e tyre, në rënien e tyre. Si ju duket gjithë perspektiva e Shqipërisë duke pasur të gjithë këta aktorë të njëjtët thuajse dhe si ju duket ecuria e Shqipërisë në perspektivë?
My experience in Albania has been an interesting one because you don't often get to see history made in short periods of time. It took the United States 200 years to develop to a certain point, and in my 20-something years coming to Albania, I've been able to see a tremendous amount of change. So has the standard of living for almost everybody in Albania improved dramatically since I first came? The answer is clearly yes. So many things have changed in this country, from traffic on the street to banks and banking and the financial system and how that works, to connection to the world, to technology, all kinds of things, integration. So in some ways, you have to step back and say Albania has made a tremendous amount of progress during this time. And obviously that has been made under the leadership of successive governments, and people who are today in government were the opposition a few years ago, and people who are in the opposition today were in government, leaders in government, which is a natural kind of thing. And we've tried to make sure that we had a dialogue with all of those people. And the dialogue that we've been able to have is, I think, an interesting one for us, but also an interesting one for them. You know, there aren't too many people that government leaders can talk to that don't have a political agenda. You know, there's nothing we really want from the government. I'm not looking for a job in the Albanian government. And so we can provide, I'm not actually representing the United States in the way that the ambassador is representing the United States. And so we can have a dialogue that is, I think, pretty unique. And I think that government leaders from every party during my time here have welcomed that dialogue in that way. And I think that's, as I mentioned to you, I think it's been an important reason for our success, but also I think it's been a good input to people in government.
Cili është çelësi I suksesit që ja keni dalë në Shqipëri kaq shumë vite? Duket terreni vështirë.
Well, I'm a tenacious guy, and you have to work at things. You know, I think Einstein said that most of life was 1% was inspiration and 99% was perspiration, and I think that we've tried to combine those things. So you have to keep at it. You have to work at it. You have to show up. You have to do all of the things that make you successful in business. You have to do them in this context. And if you think about it and you work harder than most people and you are very focused on what you need to do, then you can be successful.
Kush është trashëgimia më e vlerë që fondi ka krijuar dhe po lënë në Shqipëri sipas jush?
This is obviously not an easy question. And I think the fund and foundation have different legacies. The major legacy of the fund, I think, is that it is possible to grow and prosper economically in a transparent, honest way. People weren't sure of that when the fund started, and I think we were able to demonstrate that that could be the case. That you could do good and do well, let's say, at the same time. The challenge for the foundation, or the legacy of the foundation, is can the foundation address the broader array of things that contribute to private sector development over time and move the needle on them? Move the needle on education, move the needle on the development of inner cities, move the needle on leadership, move the needle on entrepreneurship. And if we're able to do that, we can't see that result today necessarily. You can see it if you go to the bazaar in Tirana, and you can see how it looks differently than it did before. But obviously things that we do in education, it's going to take time to see those things. On the fund side, you could see that we built this business, what happened to it, and it was, you could put your arms around it. And we'll find out whether we've been able to be successful at having the kind of impact that we want in the foundation over the years ahead. But the interesting thing about the foundation is that it's perpetual. So it's going to be around long after me, long after any prime minister, long after any US ambassador, and we'll be here to be a partner in a way with the people of Albania over time. And there are very few things like that, right? That will hopefully stand the test of time and be perpetual. And so you'll be able to ask, you and your successors will be able to ask that question to me now, in 3 years, in 5 years, and I hope in 20 years or in 50 years.
Dhe me qënë se përmëndët vitet që do të vinë, në një moment që ndoshta nuk do të jeni në këtë pozicion, do të vinit të pinit një kafe në Shqipëri, të qëndronit në Shqipëri, është Shqipëria një vend që do ta konsideronit për të pushuar, për të kaluar një pjesë tjetër tuaj?
Well, as you may know, one of the honors that I received here was to have an Albanian passport. So there's a way in which I'm already a citizen here. And so one of the nicer things about my life over the last couple of decades has been my experience here. And so my guess is that that experience will continue as long as I'm able to come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Granoff. Thank you for the interview.
Good.
Faleminderit.
Okay. Glad to be with you.